everybody, welcome to our continued learning series on project technologies. Today I'm super excited for us to be able to take a look at something called the Project Accelerator. This was actually designed by Microsoft to continue to build upon, or more rather collect and centralize the information for Project for the Web. As you know, there is quite a lot going on, and there's going to be a lot of things that are going to continue to happen all together. So our goal today is just to help you guys get in. And as you know, been doing technology for a long time. I'm excited to kind of dig in and show you the key values as well as some of the restrictions, things that you need to be paying attention to that it may not be a right fit at your time in terms of what you're looking for. So as we get in here, I encourage people always to send me questions. If you have any questions, a lot of our staff happy to answer that. But let's jump right into today's topic. So one of the things that we're looking at is a shift in direction where Microsoft's looking at the collaboration space. They're looking at the ecosystem of the different technologies that support project, program, and portfolio management. Well, that doesn't just happen in a vacuum. In fact, if all we focused on was just the project management side of the house, we'd be missing a lot of the collaboration, the connectedness. As you certainly have realized through COVID, is suddenly people are working remotely. There's a lot happening that's, in a sense, making people saying, I need better visibility of what's going on. So as we think about getting a peek at our overall agenda in terms of the connector, project for the web, some of the directions, the dynamics project operations, Microsoft Project Professional Desktop still exists. There's the Project Online, Microsoft To Do, Teams has lists. There's a lot of ways to approach solving it, including even pulling in things like Planner. So there's free versions, there's paid versions, and all of these kind of sit directly in a path to help you escalate. So what we're going to do is we'll talk about the standalone and the accelerator, Project for the Web. And the idea is that there's a process that this accelerator helps to begin to start organizing your life cycle, talking about intake, managing programs, looking at connected resources or resource information. Again, nice thing about this is that as we talk the blending of Power Apps and Power BI and the Power Platform, is you're going to start to see what organizations who are out there today, including ours, that are building tools or solutions that says, you know what, we're really on this dataverse. We can bring in the right information from the right tools, and people can work exactly how they want. So we'll do a little bit of a bake-off. I'll talk about the juxtaposition between multiple types of approaches of using the tool and if it's the right fit for you. And then again, we'll dig in a little bit deeper and just look at some of the screens or views of the technology itself. So modern project management tools, kind of bridging the Microsoft Project Online to Project for the Web and some of the other elements there. And as we get in, there definitely is a gap. And that's where Microsoft has begun to say, you know what, they've left the door open for quite a while in maybe the agile space, looking at what nonprofits or organizations that might be low to mid maturity are actually going to need in pulling those pieces together. So in getting into the environment itself, there's a gap approach that needs to happen. And Microsoft recognized that they need to go a lot further, especially around collaboration. I usually joke with project managers and tell them, hey, listen, you know, it's not about sitting in front of Microsoft Project in a schedule. It's about collaboration, visibility, early warning, letting people get in and out of the technology and get back into the relationship side. So there's certainly transactional things that need to happen, and certainly there's relational things need to happen, but you can't manage large programs without visibility and metrics, and you can't mature an organization without dashboards and reports. So the idea is these platforms in many cases that people are using aren't connected together. And so as an executive or a C-level officer, or if you're a business decision maker or a leader, it's hard to kind of chase and pull that information. So the idea is there has to be an easy way to bring data together, faster setup, maybe less external consulting. In fact, a lot of people go, hey, I've got a license, I turned on Project Online, or I turned it on. Okay, now what do I do? So they need to bring that down a little bit closer together and give people kind of a path to go forward. As I kind of joke around with the engineering teams and certainly with people who are working in project technologies, is that Microsoft does an amazing job building good products. And so do other organizations. But in many cases, these other organizations, perhaps they might have one tool, but they've kind of glued the pieces together and give you kind of packages to work with, where Microsoft will take a lot of their tools and dump them on the table like Legos and go, they're all easy to work with. You can come up with any combination, but we haven't pre-assembled these. And so what you're going to see with this accelerator is this is where Microsoft is moving, is to help kind of bundle the pieces together and speed that process along. So if you think about the pendulum of task management, which is really granular. No, I need to get pizza for the pizza party. Hey, we better get more coffee because the team's going to be pulling an all-nighter. Do we put those tasks into a project schedule and then resource load it and look for earned value? Probably not. And so we go from this task management all the way up to program, portfolio, epics, releases, looking at the entire life cycle of demand and capacity planning, and then saying, what are our business drivers? How do we weigh and rank our projects? And so there's a big difference between these type of elements that are pulled together. And as you see from the screen here, that work management is kind of where people live. And hence, this is where Planner and some of these other tools have come in to help. Once Microsoft recognized that Project for the Web is intent is to begin bridging that gap between some of that task work management, which is highly collaborative, very visible, very agile, but really start moving it into saying, we have a portfolio, we have a program, how do we pull those together? And maybe I don't need to start with the heaviest tool, but I need to find a right blend between how these work together. Again, from an organizational perspective, a lot of people are wrestling with, I'm in Excel, I track things in Outlook, I've got a SharePoint list. And so whether you're in a flat file, or you're using a Monday.com, or you're kind of out there kind of wrestling through some of this, what I call very localized task or table related information, it's very helpful. But in a sense, there is a blend in the Office 365 stack that says you can actually start pulling these pieces together. Now, I won't get too deep into methodology because I want to drill right into that accelerator and talk about that and strengths and its weaknesses. But overall, when you talk about connected systems and platforms, there's a lot going on, right? You might be dealing with asset management. You might be dealing with intake or healthcare. You might have governance and security rules. Again, we have data, we have people, we need to do forecasting. I need to forecast a crew or a team and make sure that their shifts are scheduled. And again, I have all these artifacts that are produced, which would be documents, notes, conversations. And inherently, you've got devices that you're managing. Well, the idea from that is that certainly as Microsoft pulls the Dynamics, the Office, and certainly Azure together in that one platform, it's really helpful to pull those elements together. The phraseology, we talk about DevOps, right? The idea of development and operations, in many cases is a very close combination that says running the IT organization and making sure that the lights are cared for, patching and working from the trouble ticket perspective to, hey, we actually have large projects and we need to budget those in finance. They really have a relationship and they aren't just different tools, and those tools shouldn't not talk to each other, right? They need to be connected. So in looking at that kind of blending together of the platforms themselves, the whole idea is that as you look at task management, work management, and project program and portfolio management, again, they are connected systems. And so bringing these together, certainly with Teams and Planner and To-Do and Outlook and SharePoint and Project for the Web, and certainly, the legacy project technologies, all of these have and play a role. So our goal is to make sure that, regardless of what tool you find that's a good blend for you, you can take advantage of that. So again, this is Microsoft's overview, and I'm going to bring up kind of a web screen here for you guys so you can see this a little bit better. But inherently, back at Ignite, George Bullock kind of did a presentation about this accelerator. Now, the accelerator wasn't released, and so I'm excited to say it's coming out. Should be January, should be available for folks to start downloading. And we'll talk about that and what's in there and what it does. But the idea of saying, hey, listen, perhaps we actually want to go and pull that information. And while we might be used to using kind of the time phase scheduling engine of Microsoft Project, is there something that maybe a little bit more lightweight, or certainly that's a little bit more embedded in the overall view that says, yep, we still have our dashboards and our portfolios. In fact, this is one of the Power BI reports that are connected to Project for the Web. I've taken it out. You're going to see this actually embedded in the accelerator. So what's nice about that is that you actually can take these and say, well, maybe I didn't need the all accelerator, or it's not going to help what I need. doesn't mean you can't have your connected reports and the information. And then from the PM perspective is that coming in and just really from a web perspective, having a simple schedule, something that allows me to manage and put in milestones or link pieces together, or with my team, simply flip that over and say, we want to move into that agile sprint view, look at priority, look at buckets and how we organize these. And again, edit and have what we call that multiple authors or that co-authorship of people coming in and working. So this is Project for the Web. I'm actually showing you kind of the tool that came out back about a year ago. Microsoft released this and began saying, hey, listen, you can take advantage of that. Well, it was great in a standalone mode, but we, in many cases in organizations, like to pull all the projects into that one view, really have that big picture of what's going on and having some of the visibility, looking at some of the timelines for task, work, and details. So as we get back into kind of the overall environment of what we have in our visibility, remember that this solution is sitting fully in the Microsoft Dynamics Project and Office Online environment. So we've got this dataverse of information. We can use Power Automate to move data back and forth. So I got really excited when this was coming out. And so while impatiently going, yeah, there are times when I really do need a heavier project management tool, I want to make sure that whatever direction I recommend for customers, or perhaps what's there for you, is that it's going to live, it's going to be sustainable, and it's something that you can certainly scale. So let's talk about the accelerator. And I really asked the question, are you looking for standalone project management, or do you need to have it integrated? And if it's integrated, you begin to see the narrowing of the paths of the tools that you work with. So again, from an accelerator's perspective, the idea is that, hey, listen, let's introduce a few pieces that we've done certainly and exist right now, either in SharePoint or Project Online. You've got this intake process where you can begin capturing and approving that demand. And then you can move through and start organizing projects perhaps in bundles or programs, right? You think about epics or releases, or we have certainly a feature schedule that says we want to be working through that, or a portfolio of initiatives. This is the first time with Project for the Web to begin to start to be collectively organized. And again, while there's still limitations on how much customization you could do, at least we can begin putting those pieces together. And so the other part is that in general, if you go to Teams, right, the same security schema that Planner has, is that it uses this open schema of, hey, if you're an Active Directory, I can pull you and put you onto a team. Well, Project Online, or Project Server, for those of you that remember the on-premise version, has a fully blown resource pool. There's a lot that we can do there in terms of generics. And so this marriage of, hey, listen, we need to kind of bring a resource pool or bring in other resources needs to be helpful, and not just with live or living people, is that we really need to budget and plan for what are those work activities that perhaps are what skill set or what trade craft do we need to bring in. We don't know who's available, but we want to take a look at that. Now, this is where another technology called project operations, or for those that have worked in the Dynamics world, something that was called project service automation, right? The idea that I can actually start doing better resource planning, looking at knowledge, skills, and abilities. But Project Operation, October 1st of 2020, was released, and it's designed to live there in the dynamic stack, is also a lot bigger, right? So sometimes people aren't ready to wrestle with a larger tool as they're maturing. And this is kind of where that accelerator and Project for the Web come in and help you out. So again, a lot of out-of-the-box views. We'll see some of those as well. And then the idea is that if we start thinking about CRM, for those of you that are using Dynamic CRM, is Project for the Web is the scheduling tool. When you want to build a plan and say, hey, I think this is what it's going to look like, and I'm writing a proposal for a request for a customer, why do we have to reinvent that wheel? I can use Project for the Web and begin to infuse that in together and begin talking about budgets and estimates. So again, there's a connectedness between, say, CRM, talking about project operations, which will tie back into financials, so what we call F&O in Dynamics. But inherently, the idea is that the accelerator brings these pieces together and starts to give you, from a project program portfolio view, visibility to some of the areas that are coming in, including capturing those ideas, working through the business case, and then connecting issues, risks, as well as tasks and resources in there so that you can begin rating and ranking the financial goals that are available. So I've got a couple screenshots here if you want to take a look at the screen here. And the idea of our intake process is pretty simple. So while I get in here, I'm going to talk about what you see right now. First off, if you don't notice, if you look in that upper left-hand corner, it says Power Apps. So guess what? You can build Power Apps to bring this information in and pull it together. This isn't necessarily rocket science, but Microsoft's done a great job in kind of bundling the pieces together and leveraging kind of the ecosystem to say, hey, you could start with the dashboard. You could look at the active requests. You could look at kind of a financial summary. And in the image on the lower right-hand corners, we can actually start drilling into what are the overall active projects, or we can begin filtering or grouping what's coming in that intake process. So as from a high-level view is that this becomes the portfolio, or some of us, we talked about the project center in Project Online. Again, very much contained inside of this window. Inherently, as much as I'd like to get a little bit more real estate, the idea though is that people can quickly select and view. If you need to have more details, this is where we begin expanding out, going, well, maybe a Power BI report will be, or a view will be better for you. And so again, think of it this way, as this is a view and this is where you can edit some of that information. Now, intake is really important. In fact, we talk about capturing demand and making sure that we can get things done as you get started. So the idea is that if you can't get a handle on all the work that's coming in, then it's really hard to manage that. So pushing the intake request process into this is helpful. In fact, look at this real quickly, is that you can come in, you can create a request, you can group them, you can say, hey, what's the status of that request? And so you have this little collaboration portal that if you use your quick launch on the left-hand side, just allows you to kind of jump in and say, hey, I've got visibility to the overall types, the work, the cost, and the schedule of what these requests are. Again, thinking about licensing is that who needs to come in and create the request might be something to consider. Does everybody in the organization need that? I'm sure Microsoft would love you to pay for a license for everybody for project. But then again, maybe perhaps what we really need is we have a channel of people that say, hey, when we have a request, surface those, bring them in so we can weigh them, measure them, and prioritize those. So capturing very high level is the intake process. And if you don't have that, it's great to think about it. And while standalone is wonderful for managing a project, you could have these spun up everywhere and really not necessarily saying, you know what, these three projects are very similar. Three different parts of the organization are trying to manage that. So continuing that process, the accelerator has another element that is also fairly new, or at least a way to we call group projects together. Does not exist if you're using Project for the Web all by itself, and so you'll want to bring this in. If you're in Project Online, this exists natively normally. It's just kind of the ability for you to kind of preset those up. But this is an area where you could be saying, you know what, I want to create a program. I want to bundle or capture financials or other related information inside of there. And of course, as you manage and track those, it rolls up into that outline format. So again, from the program perspective, we look at how do we have a view for that. And again, moving down that quick launch there on the left-hand side, you'll just see that I'm jumping from programs, which I'll drill into projects and talk about resources. But again, looking at the initiatives in a list view, you can click on any one of these. And of course, where you want to group them, you can drill into the details. We talk about status, what projects, what notes, you could have related information. And I like the idea is that the intake process will also keep that information, including like the business case, things that you're saying, here's why we're justifying it, or here are the notes, so that when it does get handed off to a project manager who's going to tackle it, they actually have the history of what it was when it came in. So thinking in terms of that overall program view, here it is. We can actually take a look at a list and scroll up and down. In fact, one of the things that we're going to be doing in some future videos is I'm going to quickly go in and be doing little demo sessions around each one of these and talking about some of the best practices that fit around the different parts of the tools. Now, again, in the view, you'll see that we actually have the ability for us to create, refresh, assign. You've got templates that you can pull in here. And again, the overall idea is that the information is surfaced and editable, or you can drill into each and every one of those. Now, when we think about taking the intake from a portfolio or program perspective, kind of organizing what we're doing, ultimately all of this ends back up in the project itself. So the accelerator continues giving you some visibility, saying, hey, look, we can drill into a project. Again, I've got financials, I've got resources, I can look at the tasks, issues and risks. Something that you don't have if you're just using that standalone view are now contained here. So there's extra entities that Microsoft has added and connected those to the project. Now, one of the things that you'll find is that when you drill into the project, on the menu there, it says open it in project. And when they say project, they mean Project for the Web. So the idea is that when you pop in here, you literally will launch right back into the project itself. And so now we can visually go in and continue to manage. We can assign our resources. You can promote them, you can outdent them, and you have information around these that are available for you to do in flyout menus. Dependencies, and again, even notice down here, hint, hint, you could add attachments. Something that I'm very excited that came out in January of this year is our ability to say, you know what, on these tasks, Planner does a great job of linking our attachments. We now can also add attachments to our tasks. So back in the old days when we used Microsoft Project, we literally would just jump in and actually would assign pictures or graphics to images, and that project file got really big. And so pretty soon you had this 30 megabyte file and you have 40 rows, and people are like, why is it so big? Well, people were embedding their PowerPoints and their documents and their pictures. And so in this case, we kind of follow that vein, which is Planner, which is also owned by the Microsoft Project team, is really now saying you can also connect attachments and information that, again, keeps that story connected right inside of that activity. And if you do need to drill in and say, you know what, we really more of an agile crew, where I want to come in here and say, hey, what's next up? Let's plan our key deliverables. So I can look at working in a board view where I can drag and drop and move these around. But again, you can do this in the little Power App window, or you can launch and simply open it in Project and have the full view. So I like the connectedness, kind of moving things forward. And of course, as we think in terms of the checklist of that, is a lot of people will simply spin that out and have that available. Now, continuing in that conversation is about resources. And again, this was a gap that Project for the Web had. It didn't really have this consolidated resource pool. Our organization, a lot of times what we would do is say, well, listen, if I've got an email address and I actually have a central resource pool, I can marry Project for Web and Project Online together in our reporting. But now what you're being able to do is to start kind of creating a kind of a template of here's our active or bookable resources. Now, this is important because when we get into project operations and some of the dynamics components, this is where sales reps are saying, hey, I need to put together a quick schedule. What do I think I need? I need a BA, a PM, 5 developers. I need a construction crew, a crane, and I'm going to have to pull these together. So the idea is centralizing this in the accelerator will help you be able to kind of organize those. And then you can drill into any one of these and say, hey, let's look at just some general related information, as well as I can start seeing kind of their schedule of what they're doing. Now, not just seeing the workload of a schedule in terms of tasks and activities, but then we step across with that accelerator and saying, hey, I've got a request dashboard. Here's kind of what's coming in. Maybe I want to drill in and see what are the programs or the program information. So there's a great set of Power BI reports. I was showing you some of them live, or I'd taken them separately out, and you can actually kind of use them or blow them up into your own screen. So whether it's the intake process, or you're drilling right into, hey, let me look at the overall programs. I want to take a look at these. As you know, in Power BI, it's all interactive, so you can click on the state field, the goals, the business unit. You can click on parts of it. Again, from a mobile experience, you can do this and touch it on your phone to see, hey, what's the overall budget? How are we doing in terms of our roll-up information? Again, remember, there's not a ton of custom fields in here, but it has the lion's share of what organizations start wrestling with in terms of organizing work in their work initiatives. So that accelerator continues down the process of saying, hey, listen, I've got portfolio health, where I can look at the overall program, what the states are, and again, giving a picture. What I like about this is the portfolio dashboard actually gets into effort. And this is where we're currently with Project for the Web. We talk about looking at that fixed duration, fixed work, fixed units, where you can get very granular with the classic version of Project Online or Project Desktop. In many cases, people are not using it for hours, but as we begin working a little closer, saying, hey, I really need to budget what is the level of effort to deliver the work against not just one project, multiple projects against a resource. This is truly that combination of that demand and capacity that is really in what I call its fledgling state. So in this case, you'll start seeing that ability to connect, look at your portfolio. You can look at progress and effort. And again, this Power BI report view that you have certainly exists externally. You can also have these with, your classic or regular Microsoft project. It just depends on how deep you need to get into that resource capacity, level of effort, and deliverability. Continuing in terms of overall health and dashboards, you're going to find that there's financials. Again, high level, what is our budget? What is our burn rate? I'm looking at some of the information. And what's nice here, if I kind of zoom for a moment, is while we're working in the overall section here is that you can actually get in and put in a link. Means you can drill right to that project if you need to. So again, one version of the truth really kind of centralized through the accelerator to help speed things up, including giving you a snapshot of the timeline. If you truly are getting into the details where you're listing your risks and issues and perhaps you have related documents, there's an initial pass at organizing this. Not as open as we had in the SharePoint site for Project Online, but again, this can be tailored. And we'll talk about the pros and cons of adding more custom fields, because there's a threshold that once you cross, you're going to have to buy a Power App license as well. But in general, if that's not an issue or you've already taken care of that for your organization, you've got that flexibility to create these entities that are related to the overall project, including the issues and risks and the related information. One thing that we do quite often is people go, what changed? I want to know what it was from what I was planning to what I actually had. So there's a changes dashboard, which gets into the active changes or requests or priorities. You can kind of see what the state are of the overall projects. And again, I like the idea of taking a look at kind of that cost impact proposal or by approval. Where is that at? You've got a little bit of a funnel here where you can look at these. So again, thinking in terms of the overall visibility of our reports and our resource dashboards is that, yep, you still can start looking at that consolidated by, hey, what are resources doing by task? Perhaps I want to group it by what program we're working with, or perhaps what individual resource I'd like to see where they're at in that visibility. And again, from a resource assignments, again, you can actually drill in. One of the things I love about Power BI is you get into that kind of like that pivot grid, if you will, where you can expand and collapse the details and see that information. So in terms of the overall reporting, it doesn't leave off with resources. It also gets into something called my task or my work, right? So we can take a picture of, hey, what's all going across all projects from a task perspective? What's in organized by bucket if you're using sprints or kind of a DevOps mentality? What is the overall status? How many overdue? From a portfolio view of all tasks in all projects. But then again, if you're an end user, you need to know what you're doing. Hey, where are my work? What is the timeline or things that I'm expected to do? So the same type of reports, but this time now paired directly to your logins. You can kind of visualize those together. So whether you look at the timeline view and you see, hey, it's the overall timeline for the program itself, or if you want to drill into my work, you have that visibility. Now, I hope you're excited because I love the direction Microsoft's going. And while in some cases, a lot of our customers are way more mature, they have a lot more customization needs than that, many organizations are not. In fact, when we first started this conversation, it popped into my head, hey, what about the small mom and pop shops to the fairly large organizations that are kind of organizing, maybe doing R&D, or you're dealing with healthcare, and maybe nurses and doctors aren't wanting to be PMPs to run projects, but they are making sure that that epic release is going to make sure that the key deliverables are done. So in terms of thinking through this is that there are strengths and weaknesses, and while the accelerator kind of continues to propel Project for the Web forward, making it more and more viable for more organizations, there are some things you've got to watch out for that may not necessarily fit what your needs are at this time. So as we think about what I call the good, the bad, the ugly, or at least the comparison, is great strengths, right? You've seen some of those, some of the screenshots centralized. You've got a central portal for programs and pre-assembled items or entities that are related. We don't have that dealing with standalone. Project Online, all of this is native, right? It exists there and it works, and it's very much that very customizable environment, but also requires a little bit more setup. So this is a much faster path to moving forward, but then you want to make sure you're not bumping your head on the ceiling. Again, downloadable and free, that's always a great thing. Just every time you hear downloadable and free, sometimes you think, all right, what am I getting and what am I not getting with the free version? So again, the reports themselves, as I've shown, can be independent. Of course, you can use Power Automate, or for those of us that remember, they called it Flow when they first came out, is you can actually set alerts and triggers and notifications behind the scenes. So still building on that CDS 2.0, or now called the Dataverse of the Dynamics platform, the Office 365 platform, and our ability to make sure that we're aligned with the full direction where Microsoft's going. So we know in 4, 5, 6 years from now, this really is where Microsoft wants to live. And so it may not be a perfect fit today, but you have to look at what is the timing for your organization and what you're trying to do. Again, we now have the ease of scheduling with the ability to have enterprise capabilities kind of folded in. And again, it's designed to be, just as I said, easy to use, but certainly for that low maturity organization who wants to quickly jump in and begin moving forward. Great fit if you're trying to begin herding the cats. And there's other ways to approach and organize high-level information. In fact, we have organizations that use Project for the Web, use Planner. They connect Planner to Project Online, and they do their strategic planning in Project Online, but they don't need everybody there because most people live in their regular work worlds, and they use Power BI to bridge the gap between those, or they use a Power App to create kind of a quick visual. Again, it's integrated with Dynamics CRM, which is exciting because now we begin moving upstream and having better visibility to what's coming. Secondarily, we talk about weaknesses, right? So one of the things that we get into is that if you need to customize more than 5 things, you're going to need a Power App license. Unfortunately, that's just the way it works today. At some point, that might change. I know that nonprofit organizations get like 10 free Power App licenses, and so small orgs, in many cases, not quite an issue. But you need to think about this, which is, hey, out of the box might be great as an uplift, but then you might be bumping your head on the ceiling of we need a little bit more, or we're doing a lot higher or deeper strategic planning or portfolio management. Or as we get into looking at more of an earned value dashboards, we're looking at schedule cost and performance indicators. We really think that might not be the right place to jump into. And if you're going to customize it, you'll just need to add additional licensing, which then again might make this priced in the same area where you say, you know what, I could just do the same thing in Project Online. Limited resource project and program customizations, right? They've added some things. Think about that. You add the low-hanging fruit, which assembles and delivers most of the high-value items. But again, there's a limitation on how deep you can go into the resource pool, all the customization. As of this presentation, it's not available for government cloud, which really drives me nuts because there's some great organizations out there in the government space that really could jump on and use this. And even if they're just kind of doing their own little organization, they don't have to necessarily go fully to the Office 365 Project Online mode. Yes, it still requires a little consulting to assist in configuration, but really in many cases, implementing and setting these things up, the heavy lifting is like 30 to 40%, sometimes the training piece. Training, this is really easy stuff to put together. So the training can be really more infused around, hey, let's teach you some of the basics about doing project management. And by the way, the tool. People should be able to get in, get out, and get back to work. Again, thinking about, who has access to the schedule. We talk about, is there baselines yet? Not yet. Are there custom fields added? Yep, there's entities that are being added, and Microsoft will continue to trickle those in. But again, if you go to Project Desktop or Project Professional or Project Online, they still have really the lion's share of your ability to pivot and dream up any scenario, and again, keep that self-contained. So again, I talk about that higher maturity organizations will quickly outgrow this. Or if they're wanting to say there's certain types of projects they work with, this might be a good fit. But other elements is that maybe we have a bigger portfolio picture that we would synchronize between the two. So again, complex schedule analysis, you're dealing with 10,000 rows, not the right fit. There is a limitation to the number of rows that you can have here. And so in terms of Project for the Web, these are standard and published, and Microsoft will keep updating those on their website. So I want to wrap today with a couple things. I got a couple matrices that I put together to help people kind of go, oh, if I'm looking at SharePoint or Planner or Project for the Web or Project Online, or I want that portfolio analyzer, which is a Plan 5 license, or I'm mixing Power BI in with the overall team organization. I organize this first by kind of the life cycle, which is if you're an intake, there's options. Project for the Web, I put a Power App icon there, but really it's the accelerator, right? The idea that, yep, if you use the accelerator, we can kind of bridge some of these gaps today. Otherwise, native standalone, you're not going to have an intake process. You'll see where Planner kind of fits with planning, build, and execution. But then when we start thinking about collaboration, really the ability to have that conversation is, you know what, threaded conversations, certain tools are kind of available. And this is where Teams comes in and says, you know what, I'll just add it as a tab, and we can have that as a private channel or a team organized where people can organize that, and we have a tab for the project piece if we need to. So again, documents, artifacts, we can kind of see the range together. Still true portfolio, or at least what I call the best swipe at portfolio management. You're going to start moving into what we call project operations. You'll start moving into Project Online. These are really built and have some of these connected pieces that are native to that tool. I flipped the whole thing around, not just by life cycle, said, okay, let's take a look at this matrix and we'll talk about collaboration, document management, and then just look at the swim lane of what tool am I actually grabbing? If I'm using Planner or Teams, how do these fit together? Again, this is subject to change. Roadmap, of course, at the bottom there comes in with Project. So you're going to see that there's a roadmap tool that allows you to share information. And some organizations are using DevOps. But if we look at Project for the Web, Connector really starts closing in some of the things that it didn't have, which is a great story to be able to tell. So again, if you're wrestling with some of these, I encourage people just pick up the phone and call. I love giving people the right answers, pointing the right direction, making sure you know the strengths and weaknesses in pulling the pieces together. So I hope today was helpful in terms of the overall Webs Accelerator. As we get into really working and growing both technology and methodology to help organizations be able to pivot and have their dashboards and mature, it's important for us to understand that in some cases, certain tools are the right tool for the job, others are not, right? So need to find that happy balance. So it may not be available in government, so that might be something you're waiting for. Perhaps your organizational maturity is beyond, and so what you're looking for is, can I do it in a hybrid mode and then synchronize things between, say, Project Online and Project for the Web? Otherwise, this is the direction Microsoft's going. So if you're moving that same direction, it's something certainly to consider. And if you think about it, Microsoft is going to continue to expand and grow their accelerator and Project for the Web, making sure that they will have new pieces. So if your maturity is actually fairly slow or your culture change may take more time, might be a great fit to take a look at. Again, limited schedule, program, and portfolio abilities today, right? So we certainly know that Microsoft will continue to expand and grow there. This is their charter. I know that they're looking at some point to say, hey, when do we have crossover? You now can take a Microsoft Project desktop version and save it into Project for the Web. So you're really going from a highly functional tool saying, you know what, I want to kind of strip out that functionality for the lightweight nimbleness of that. So there's options there. And again, that single view of the accelerator kind of blends things together. And again, the idea is that we're all in that dataverse, right? Leveraging Power BI, leveraging Power Automate, and we have that Power App experience getting in there. So hope this answered some questions for you, and I look forward to hearing from anyone as you have questions. Stay tuned. We're going to actually do some live demos on future videos where I'll be going into the tool, showing some things, how they work, but we'll break those up into small bite-sized pieces. So thank you from me and from everyone at Advisicon.